Hello, everybody. We're back with another video. This one is an interesting one, as this video is a result of past Zoom recordings that have been going on YouTube. To start, I actually want to introduce some of our guests that we have on today's video. First, I want to start with Michelle, and she's going to go ahead and take it from here a little bit and explain exactly what we're going to be talking about in this video.
Hi, everybody. So World Mission a few days ago served me and my attorney, I should say, with subpoenas that they allegedly served on YouTube and Zoom for some Zoom recordings and YouTube live recordings, I believe the subpoenas say. They basically want the information that wasn't published on Zoom and YouTube from what it seems in the subpoenas, but I'll let Peter talk about that more. So I'm going to introduce Peter Skolnik. He's my attorney in the two cases that I have against World Mission in the Superior Court of New Jersey right now. He represented Raymond Gonzalez in a lawsuit against the church that nullified the NDA. The court declared unenforceable, null and void not too long ago. Peter has over 30 years of experience. He's litigated against cult for over a decade. He mounted effective First Amendment defenses of cult expert Rick Ross in defamation the defamation lawsuit brought by Landmark Education, and also copyright and trade secret litigation brought by the cult Nexium, whose leaders are now under federal criminal indictment. So I'll turn it over to you, Peter.
Okay, Nexium's leaders are not only under federal criminal indictment, they have been tried and convicted and are awaiting sentencing.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
That was a 10-year litigation. Well, subpoenas. Every time I have to deal with a subpoena one way or another, I am reminded of one of my favorite movie lines by one of my favorite movie actors. It's from the film Absence of Malice, starring Paul Newman and Sally Field. But the actor in question here is a guy named Wilford Brimley. And Wilford Brimley plays a federal prosecutor. And at one point, somebody says to him, well, how are you going to get that information? And he pauses for a moment and he says, subpoena, wonderful thing, subpoena. And that phrase, wonderful thing, subpoena, comes up in my mind every time I think about it. They are both wonderful and easy to abuse. And when I say easy to abuse, what I mean by that is, as long as you are a lawyer who is involved in an active litigation, you can send a subpoena to anybody. I mean, as in the cases that I'm now representing Michelle, I could tomorrow send a subpoena for Donald Trump to testify in Michelle's case. Do I have to have a good reason? No, not to send the subpoena. I mean, what that will do is it will immediately have the Donald or some of his lawyers move to quash the subpoena, which they will absolutely succeed in doing. Quash is just a fancy word to say end it, just make it go away. It becomes null and void. But the point is that subpoenas are tools used in litigation when you have to get, or when you want to try to get, some sort of either documents or testimony, or both, from somebody who is not a party to the litigation. When someone is a party to the litigation, one lawyer will send a notice to the other lawyers, not a subpoena, but a notice for a deposition or a demand to produce documents. And there are a whole slew of rules of that stage of litigation called discovery, which is all about taking depositions, exchanging documents, serving what are called interrogatories, which is basically a fancy word for sending the other side questions that they then have to answer under oath. But in the case of parties, the rules are very different than they are for non-parties. Non-parties can only be required to produce documents or give testimony, or both, by being served with a subpoena. And then once they're served with a subpoena, one of three things can happen. They can ignore it, and sometimes they do. The penalties for ignoring it, essentially when you are out of the court's jurisdiction, are not terribly frightening. Can the court sanction you for not appearing? But yeah, I mean, if a lawyer in New Jersey serves a subpoena on McDonald's for something having nothing to do really with his case, and McDonald's chooses to ignore it, McDonald's will have a hard time because McDonald's is present in New Jersey. McDonald's is basically present everywhere in the country, if not in the world. But if that same subpoena goes to Tom's hardware store in Dubuque, that he can ignore it because there's virtually nothing that the court in New Jersey can do to Tom's hardware store for ignoring the subpoena, because there's no basis for Tom's hardware store to be dragged before a court in New Jersey. But ignoring it, as I say, is one possibility. More likely, one of two things will happen, or one of three things. Either the party who receives the subpoena will decide to comply with the subpoena and produce the documents or show up for the deposition or some combination. Most people receiving subpoenas, if they have a couple of bucks to put together, and sometimes it's a lot more than a couple of bucks, have to hire a lawyer to try to negotiate. Well, okay, you've asked for this many documents, I'm willing to give you this many documents. And that kind of thing can be worked out. So responding to a subpoena by saying, yeah, I'll comply is option number two. Options 3 and 4 are both questions of somebody trying to quash the subpoena. And by somebody, what I mean is either the party who has been, the non-party who has been subpoenaed can hire a lawyer. You could try to do this yourself, but generally you'll need to have a lawyer to make a motion in the court to quash the subpoena, again, to have the court declare, no, I'm not going to enforce this subpoena, go peddle your papers somewhere else, you lawyer who sent the subpoena. Or the opposing counsel can decide to move to quash the subpoena. So, for example, here, these subpoenas have been issued by Michelle's adversary in one of the two cases that, no, both of them actually, that we're fighting in the New Jersey courts. And I was explaining to some of the other folks before this call went public that it's not even clear to me whether or not YouTube and Zoom, who are the two entities who receive these subpoenas, whether they've actually really received them and what it is that they are inclined to do about them. But whether they receive them and whether or not they are going to try to quash the subpoenas, I am going to make a motion to quash the subpoenas. Again, I'm the opposing counsel to the lawyers who sent these things. And for some reasons that we'll talk about tonight, I am not inclined to sit around and let Zoom and YouTube decide for their own reasons that they want to comply with the subpoenas. Frankly, I don't think that they would want to comply with the subpoenas, but on the off chance that they would, because of what I think these subpoenas are really trying to do, I would be inclined to try to quash them, even if Zoom and YouTube don't. And the way that works is that if I file a motion to quash, Zoom and YouTube are advised that I have filed that motion, and that suspends their obligation to do anything until the court makes a ruling on my motion to quash. So even if they were planning to comply with these subpoenas, if I make a motion successfully to quash, and I then tell Zoom and YouTube a motion to quash has been filed and it has been granted, they then don't reply to they don't they don't do anything. They then stand down. But that sort of circles back to why these subpoenas were issued and why cults like to use subpoenas. Wonderful things, subpoenas. They can be, and in this circumstance, I suspect are, effective tools of intimidation. They can intimidate sometimes the person who has actually received the subpoena. I think we can all predict that Zoom and YouTube are not going to be intimidated by these subpoenas, but that's not what's really going on with these subpoenas. What these subpoenas are calling for is for Zoom and YouTube to produce a whole bunch of stuff in their possession that is about not them, but about a bunch of you folks, a bunch of members of the church, former members of the church, who WMS, that's what I've taken to calling them, WMS is trying to send the message, essentially, we are on to you. We know that you are participating in discussions, Zoom calls, YouTube videos that are critical of us, and you know how fond we are of being criticized. So we are going to try to intimidate you into stopping that stuff by letting you know that we're going to get copies from Zoom and YouTube of what you've said in the past, and be warned that we'll get it if you do it again in the future, and you better shut up. That's the function of the subpoenas, and you know, the attempt to intimidate is in my book an intimidation, even if the person who they are trying to intimidate isn't particularly intimidated. I mean, you know,
Right.
let's say that Zoom, WMS uses or were to get the information they're asking for, and were to use it to now start suing a bunch of other people, a bunch of you people, for defamation or some other cockamamie claims that they could dig up, just as they did with Michelle. My point is that they may be trying to intimidate you into not doing anything further, and whether or not you continue to do something further, and I gather for several of you, you are sort of dedicated to continuing to speak out, no matter what intimidations they try to throw in your path. Even if you do not yield to the intimidation, in my book, it is a variety of witness tampering. And, you know, okay, so you can say, well, witness to what, though? To a lawsuit that doesn't yet exist, because none of you are going to be witnesses in Michelle's case. Those of you who are already know it. But, you know, look, there's a whole history behind the ability to quash subpoenas that are really designed to allow the person issuing the subpoena to get information about relationships and communications to which they are simply not entitled. I think that probably the granddaddy of these cases is a case, I don't remember the name of the whole case, but the party who was moving to quash the subpoena was the NAACP, the National Association of Advancement for Colored People. And essentially what had happened is somebody had issued a subpoena to try to get membership lists of all members of the NAACP, their names, their addresses, their phone numbers, and you know, this I was gonna have to stop and think for a minute whether or not this was before or after the Klan was around and active, and I stopped myself by remembering, well, the Klan is still around and active. It may not be using
Yeah.
that name now quite as much, and the Imperial Wizard may be just the Grand Poobah, but they're still out there and they're still a threat. And again, the test case here was whether or not simply by issuing a subpoena, the plaintiff in that case, I'm saying the plaintiff, I mean, I don't remember who the parties were. It might have been the plaintiff, it might have been a defendant, but whoever it was that was trying to get the NAACP's membership lists was clearly doing it in order to, send a shot across the bow, to just sort of warn everybody who was affiliated with that organization. We're going to find out who you are, and you can read in the papers the kinds of things that we are capable of doing if we decide we don't like you. And happily, the case, the court quashed that subpoena, and those membership lists were not turned over. And the case has become important because some of the language in the case, in its justification for denying the subpoenas, made it crystal clear that the court understood exactly what was behind the subpoena, understood exactly why it had been sent, what effect it was going to have, why that was inappropriate, and why it violated the First Amendment's freedom of both speech and assembly. The freedom of assembly goes to also who you're having relationships with, who you're communicating with, and that's the kind of stuff that these subpoenas to Zoom and YouTube are looking for. I mean, just to be absolutely crystal clear about why I'm saying that. I mean, I'm reading now from the documents that World Mission is asking Zoom to produce. It's any and all recorded Zoom calls between Jordan Hatfield and one or more of the following persons, regardless of who initiated the call, regardless of who recorded the call, and regardless of the length of time any person spent on the call. It then names 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 people. Now, the fact is that what is conspicuously missing from the explanation of the documents to be produced is any hint of what any of those communications have to do with Michelle's cases.
That's what I was trying to get at.
From which these subpoenas were issued. I mean, when a lawyer is trying to get information, they're meant to be getting information that is relevant to the claims and defenses in the case that they're litigating.
Right.
And there is nothing to suggest that. I mean, look, I know some of the folks on this list because of some other subpoenas that have been issued. But I don't know some of these names. I don't know some of these people. I suspect that some of you watching this don't know some of these people. But certainly I can predict for you that if any of them had, or if some of those people had anything whatsoever to do with Michelle's case, Michelle, who has a mind like a steel trap, would know that and would remember that. So, this has nothing to do with Michelle's cases. But that's not what it's about. It's not really an attempt on the part of my friend Steve Procaccini, the main lawyer for World Mission in these cases. His objective here is not to get information to help him in this case. His objective here is to get information for World Mission to use for its own separate purposes that have nothing to do with this case. Look, I will say, because I believe it, that one of the problems that as his adversary I confront in litigating these cases is that very often the lawyers who are representing World Mission have not learned the lesson that I think every good lawyer has to learn, of being able to say no to your client when they ask you to do something that is inappropriate and not related to the case that they're litigating. I take it sort of as a point of pride that in a firm that I used to work at, a fairly important client of the firm once wanted me to bring a trademark infringement suit. He was in the business of manufacturing the little brown bottles that some medicines come in. And some guy who used to work for his company had formed a separate company and was now manufacturing little brown bottles that medicines come in. And he wanted me to bring a trademark infringement suit, that the other guy's little brown bottles were, everybody would think that they were his little brown bottles, and that was a trademark infringement. And I sat there in my office looking at his little brown bottles on my shelf and the other guy's little brown bottles on my shelf. And I called him and I said, I'm not going to bring this suit. This is just a losing waste of time suit. And there was a pause, and he said, you're the only lawyer I know of who won't sue. And I said, yeah, I won't sue when there's nothing to sue over, buddy. Well, you know, he then complained to some of the other lawyers. But as I say, for me, it's a point of pride. You have to know when to say no. I've had other instances, you know, I get, because I do a lot of work in the area of defamation, I don't know, once a month, I'll get some email suggesting that they want me to sue somebody for defaming them about something. Well, as it happens, I don't actually ever, yeah, I think ever. I won't ever bring a plaintiff's defamation suit, but I do a lot of work defending defamation defendants. And when I get one of these calls from someone who is suggesting that they've been defamed and they want me to sue the son of a bitch, putting aside that I wouldn't take the case even if I thought it was a good one, I find myself very often trying to explain to the emailer, who I'll sometimes get involved in a telephone call with, especially if they seem to have a sympathetic case. I mean, you know, yes, they have been wounded. Their reputation may, in fact, have even been damaged. But I'll then have to explain to them why bringing a lawsuit as a plaintiff in a defamation case, it's just a bad idea. The stakes are heavily stacked against you. That varies from state to state. As it happens, New Jersey, where I do a lot, but not all of my defamation litigation, is about the most defendant-friendly state in the country for defamation. It's got a very, very good body of defendant-friendly defamation law. But put aside that the cases are, for a plaintiff, hard to win. Plaintiffs who sue for defamation, I mean, we've sort of gotten off on this riff about defamation, and I'll leave it soon, so I won't bore you with that.
Again, I'm learning a lot.
Plaintiffs who sue for defamation very often are made to really regret it, because what it does is it opens them up in depositions to having all kinds of things about their lives and their past explored in a deposition taken by a good defamation defense lawyer, because it's one of those, you know, defamation is one of those areas where the burden of proof is on the plaintiff, the person suing, to prove that what was said about them was false. And sometimes that is very, very hard to do. You might be able to prove that something is true, but that's not the game. The game in defamation is to prove, oh, she said that I cheated on my wife, and that's a lie. Well, in some circumstances, it would be easy to prove that that is not true. But in other circumstances, especially if the wife that was cheated on doesn't want to help, it could be very difficult to prove. Anyway, I mean, that's not necessarily a good example, but my point is that the burden of proof can be difficult for plaintiffs in defamation cases. And I've had plenty of instances when I was defending somebody in a defamation suit, even for some reasonably unseemly defendants. Anyway, enough about that stuff. What else do any of you who are here, as opposed to maybe watching this later, think we want to talk about subpoenas?
So it really interests me that the purpose of this is to get information that's relevant to the case, and everything, like in our, from what I'm gathering, from what I'm learning from you, is that all the whole purpose of them just issuing a subpoena for the Zoom and YouTube recordings, it's just to instill some type of fear, or just to let us know that, hey, we're watching you, like, you guys better stop. And if they do succeed, and let's say they do succeed in, the small chance that they do succeed in Zoom and YouTube turning over the recordings, then how is that even going to help their case? I don't.
Well, it's not going to help it's not going to help the cases that are being litigated now for Michelle. It has nothing to do with those cases.
Right.
The problem, and the reason that we're going to move to quash, is because it will then give them the basis to try to bring a whole bunch of other lawsuits against some of the people involved in those communications,
right,
wherever they're sitting. So, but they are. It's not going to be relevant to Michelle's cases, and that will largely be the basis for our motion to quash. The rules of discovery are very clear. I mean, it's black letter law that you are entitled to discovery that is related to the claims and defenses in this case, not in 12 other cases, but in this case. And these subpoenas just aren't.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We actually have the other Jordan joining in right now.
Yay! So Peter, just to sort of catch you up, Jordan has a church called Great Lake Studios. Are they? What state are they in again, you guys? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I can't. It's somewhere in the middle of the country, I think.
Yeah, the middle part. And he's done quite a few videos from an apologetic perspective about World Mission, and engaged in a lot of debate about their religious practices, their religious teachings. And I feel like World Mission necessarily, they don't like it. Some people have left because of the information that they've put out there.
Did you say, I'm sorry, Michelle, did you say that Jordan has a church?
A channel.
Yes,
A channel.
Jordan has, right. He also has a church, though,
oh,
from what I understand. Yeah, Great Lake Studios, I believe it's a church, isn't it? I thought I saw that on their website, but we'll let him talk about it. But he does have a channel where he has sermons, and he's engaged in a lot of discussion with former members. We even had a Zoom with current members, and I'm not so sure how World Mission reacted to having their current members on there, but I feel like this is the subpoenas may be a result of that happening. But is Jordan on? I can't.
He's trying to get there.
Hey, Jordan.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Hey, Jordan.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm in my car driving home, so.
Oh, careful.
Very good. My wife's actually driving, so.
Oh, okay, good.
Responsible. I know I'm kind of late to the conversation.
It's all good. But yeah,
okay.
we just had Michelle's attorney here, Peter, if you would like. Yeah, he was just explaining basically the gist of the whole subpoena thing, and just in a short sentence, basically, the church is trying to get the recordings turned over to them, but this information, these recordings, they're not even relevant to the case. So there's good. Michelle, if you want to explain a little bit more, elaborate to Jordan. I know you're more knowledgeable about it.
Well, I mean, not only that, but what we basically put it out on YouTube anyway. So what we recorded, the majority of it, is already in the public domain. So what they're seeking to get, from what I understand, is, you know, right before you start a meeting and before you go live, you might be waiting for people to, you know, to join the meeting or whatever it is, or if there are any closing remarks that are made after the video is, you know, stopped or the live stream is over. But essentially, you know, what we have said about World Mission has been consistent for years now. At least for me, it has. What Jordan Hatfield has been saying about them from a religious perspective has been consistent for a long time now. I don't think that there'd be anything on those recordings that would be, you know, particularly shocking to them. I think it's ridiculous. I think they're on a fishing expedition for nothing. Not only that, there's another point that we noticed in the subpoena where they have a bunch of people's names, but like how many people with the same name are going to be in YouTube and Zoom's database?
Right.
They haven't really identified people, you know, where YouTube and Zoom could say, okay, these are the recordings for this person that you asked for. So that's another reason why I personally think it's frivolous. It doesn't seem.
I was also
appropriate.
curious as to why they didn't include the other names. Like there are more people, you know.
Yeah, why us?
You know, there were other people too. So.
And keep in mind to add to what Michelle was saying, the materials that are called for are not just some of the group calls that you folks have had, but for example, they are asking for any available Zoom calls. They don't necessarily know, they probably don't know that Zoom does not keep this stuff. I had thought that they did, but apparently Michelle was reading us earlier their own internal rules. They don't keep copies of this stuff. But they were asking, for example, about any Zoom call that Jordan might have had separately and individually with Tim Hoffman or with Drew DJ Gomez or with Michelle, whether or not it had anything to do with Michelle's case. So it's not just the group calls that some of you have been involved in. These are the individual communications that Jordan had with any one of these, I don't know, it looks like 16 people.
Right.
Without any time limit, you know. He may have had a, well, I mean, Zoom hasn't been around all that long, but YouTube has. Anyway.
Okay, I see now. So they're not just asking for they're not asking for Zoom's recordings that we put on YouTube. They're not just that, but they're asking for like any sort of conversation. Okay, I got you.
Zoom conversation,
okay.
Not just the stuff that was posted on YouTube.
Got you.
No, anything.
Wow. And from what I understand, it's a very low chance that that'll even be able to be turned over to them. Like,
yeah, I can't imagine. You know, one of the things that I have come to learn and appreciate in the many years that I've been actively involved in the media and communications law bar, because very often lawyers from some of these larger entities, from Zoom and YouTube and Google, will show up and appear on panels that take place during these 2 or 3 day seminars, these large gatherings of media lawyers, is that they tend to have they tend to have very good and by and large right-thinking First Amendment lawyers running their legal departments. And given that, I would frankly be pretty astonished if the gut instinct within both Zoom and YouTube, when it comes to this kind of, you know, blatant fishing expedition, is not to want to vomit and to not want to comply. I think that all of their instincts will be no. how do we get rid of this thing?
Right. Okay. Because it's also gonna waste their time, is it?
Well, it's going to waste their time, and look, they're paying their lawyers. It's
Yeah.
not like it's going to cost incremental dollars, but on the other hand, it's taking the lawyers' time away from stuff that matters.
Right. Kelsey, do you have any thoughts?
No.
It's a lot of information.
But
I mean, my
Kelsey,
only question was answered. I mean, why would they raise a subpoena in the first place? And I think, Peter, you explained that very well. That it's a, like you said, a fishing expedition, and I'm not personally, for me, I'm not intimidated by it.
Yeah.
So
Same. Yeah, I'm not. It's like I'm getting tickled right now. I'm just like laughing about it. You know what I mean? Like,
the truth is that the phrase fishing expedition is tossed around by lawyers. I mean, if you had a transcript of every word that every lawyer spoke in this country every day, I would bet you that there are 75 references to fishing expeditions every hour of every day. Lawyers love to accuse the other ones of, well, that's just a fishing expedition. This one, they've got the large poles, they've got cans of bait, they've got, this is a fishing expedition if I've ever seen one.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. Jordan, do you have any thoughts? Is he still there? Oh, yes.
Yeah, I'm still there. I'm a little worried about how the audio is going to be.
No, you sound good. You sound good when you talk.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think my only real thought about all of it is just, I think what I've said multiple times in multiple videos all along, that part of me, honestly, has wanted the WMSCOG to take some kind of legal action against us, and not that this is anything hugely significant or that I think it's going to go anywhere, but I think the fact, the reason I've wanted partially for them to take legal action is because I feel like all that does is it just serves as solid proof and reconfirmation of everything we're saying, even just on the theological spectrum. I guess to put that aspect into it, I'll probably talk about this in another video soon, but just the whole aspect that I go back to all the time, some of Jesus's most clear teachings about what to do, how to respond to those who persecute you. And he says, if somebody persecutes you, bless them. He says, pray for those who persecute you, bless those who speak evil against you. And so just even from that kind of perspective of looking at things, this group that claims to be the one true church who's following the teachings of Christ, they put so much emphasis on these obscure commandments from the Old Testament, but yet they ignore the clearest commands of Jesus about how to love and how to treat people, and especially just how to respond to enemies, how to respond to those who speak against you. And right now, I'm saying this for any potential members who would watch. I just think this is something you need to consider. Jesus said you'll know them by their fruits. You're going to know the true and the false by their fruits. He wasn't talking about feast keeping. He was talking about an activity of love, about a changed heart, do you respond to people the way Jesus did when he was insulted and accused falsely for things? He didn't retaliate. He didn't name call. He didn't sue. He didn't open up court cases, but he continued entrusting himself to God, who judges justly. And so the fact that this is coming from the leadership, this is coming from the top. I think one excuse that would be that's often given to cover up kind of the weaknesses and the faults in this group is to say, oh, well, every group, everybody has flaws. These are all just imperfect humans. We're all sinners. But I think the fact that this is coming from the leadership, it doesn't seem fair to use that defense, if that makes sense. Because this is coming from the top. This isn't a matter of members in YouTube comments responding with, cuss words and name calling, which is a common thing that happens. This is this is the leadership. So yeah, for
Jordan,
whatever that's worth.
Jordan, let me ask you a question, and I'm certainly not inclined to get into a theological discussion about this. But if the phrase is "you shall know them by their fruits," aren't all of you people also their fruits? And is one of the points that you will know something about WMS by looking at the fruits of those people who have left and are criticizing it and are explaining what they're all about?
We are the fruit that died
Yeah. So
in their eyes.
just a very
The only fruit that really has its own continuing life and vitality, as opposed to the dead spirits of the fruits that are still there. Theology isn't my bag. My brother-in-law is a Methodist minister. That's about as close as I'm going to come.
No, but I mean, I understand what Peter's saying. It is coming from the leadership, like Jordan said. It's not the individual members. And one thing that they like to say is that, what's the verse that they quote in Acts, that if it's of God, it's gonna, like, if it's not of
it
God,
will
it's
never
gonna
fail. Yeah.
Acts chapter 5,
Right.
verse 39 to 40.
Right. They've been failing for years now, so I'm not so sure that applies, but they like to use that
Yeah.
that verse a lot.
Over and over.
Right.
Yeah. So
Quote it a lot.
it's interesting when I hear that phrase, "You will know them by their fruits," because the way that the WMSCOG explains it, it's you will know somebody by their fruit, meaning you will know somebody by the people they bring in.
Right. The number of recruits.
Yeah.
Right. They twist the meaning around.
So, like, for example, let's say I had brought in someone and then he wasn't faithfully keeping like the Sabbath day or tithing or preaching, then that will reflect back on me. I would have to reflect back on myself. And at that point, I would be worried and stressed out because I'm thinking that I'm a bad tree. I'm not bearing good fruit. So that's what the WMS explains.
But the funny thing is that if you can follow that tree all the way up, and who does it lead to? It leads to Ansang Hong and Jang Gil-ja, right? Because someone preached to you, so you looking bad reflects bad on them. Someone preached to them, so that looks bad on the person who preached to them. And again, it reflects all the way back up to Ansang Hong and Jang Gil-ja.
Exactly.
Right. The top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you want to say something, Jordan?
No, I'm trying to figure out my camera. My audio. Feel free to keep muting me. I don't know what the background audio is like, so.
Oh yeah, it's pretty hectic. So I've been muting you myself.
Okay, good.
It's all good.
I'm going to leave you all now so that you can continue to, as they used to say on Saturday Night Live, talk among yourselves.
Appreciate your time,
All right.
Peter. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter.
You have a good night.
Have a good night.
Stay safe.
Bye. Thanks. You too.
Okay, well, I felt like I was sitting in the classroom again. That's some really good information, and the way he elaborated there. So I mean, it really make a lot of sense, to me, that why they're doing this, and just the why. The why is the important thing here. Why exactly are they doing this? We already know they want to silence their critics. They don't like people talking badly about them, and it's just gonna happen over and over and over and over. I mean, we're gonna be making videos for who knows how long, and then there's potentially gonna be more people, hopefully down the line, people, if they leave the church and they feel compelled, if they want to make more videos. And I feel like this is gonna people are gonna continue to talk about them and expose them, and I don't know how they're just gonna be able to handle all of this criticism. Like, are they gonna have to go after every single recording that goes on YouTube? Like,
we're not the only ones who speak negatively about the church online. I mean, we're not even the only ones on YouTube that speak negatively about the church online.
Exactly.
So
I will say this about that, Kelsey. if they come after you, you guys should take it as a compliment, because they only really go after the people who they feel are being effective.
Oh yeah.
So like, for example, Great Light Studios has helped a lot of people exit that group. The examining site has helped a lot of people exit that group. The videos that Kelsey and Jordan have made and other people have made have helped people leave the group. And I feel that perhaps them seeing us all on a video together is perhaps too much to handle. You know, we're all agreeing about how bad they are and all the things that they do that are wrong and all the things that they deny that they do.
It's kind of like we're the Megazord of WMSCOG defenders. That's all I'm going to say.
Interesting.
I like the analogy.
Thank you.
I like it. Well,
I mean,
it's insane because, I've had like, I can't even count how many people have emailed me ever since I started making videos last year, you know. And it honestly, it's amazing because I didn't think I would be at this point, you know, in June 2020, as hectic as this year has been. As one silver lining in it has been that I've been able to help a lot of people. People have been reaching out to me, asking for just simple questions. Hey, I have a niece that's in this church. You can give me any advice, or I'm still a member and I want to figure out how to leave. What's the best way I can go about that? So this is all like this whole subpoena thing. It's very great like validation for myself, and I think Jordan Hatfield may feel the same way. Like it's just a really cool thing of feeling of validation that we're kind of like we're poking at the beast right now, you know, like they're getting angry, you know, they're getting mad, but I mean that at least that's not what I want to make them, you know. I don't want to anger them per se, but I like my whole thing is just raising awareness about this group because they have this whole propaganda machine going on. Like if you've ever been to this church, for those of you watching, for those of you here in this Zoom meeting, if you've ever seen like a video made by the church, it's just a huge, like, they just pump out propaganda left and right. You know, the community service, all this and that, like, and just people just don't know what just goes on behind the scenes. And for, you know, me and Kelsey, who are leaders in this organization, we can, you know, it's been helpful that we've been able to shed some light that, you know, maybe a member that has only been in for a year or two may not know what a member, you know, that has been in for 10 or 15 years, you know, may know. So again, it's just a really good feeling of validation. That's my whole thing with this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been dealing with it for
almost a decade.
Almost 10 years now?
Yeah.
Right. So I've had enough validation, but I'm with you guys.
Yeah.
100%.
Oh, I can't imagine how you feel. Like,
I think it's worth.
Go ahead,
sorry,
Jordan.
go ahead, Jordan.
No, you're good. You're good. Go.
Okay. No, you go, Jordan. Okay, I'll go. I was just gonna say, this is something like I get a lot of people angry on YouTube saying, why do you speak about this group? Kind of, why are you picking on this group? Why are you persecuting them? And just kind of acting like it's unfair that we would point out issues with the church, point out whether it's theological or just moral ways that they operate. And so I think one thing that, again, I'm just for those members who would watch, something that I would challenge you guys to think about, and I think is really worth thinking about, is the fact that the WMSCOG and all your preaching, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, because you once preached yourselves, but I would say a big part of the foundation of the WMSCOG preaching is based upon tearing apart every other belief system and pulling out all the problems of every other belief system. It's founded upon the arguments about why everybody else is wrong, what they do wrong, why they're children of Satan, why they don't have truth, why they're disobedient to Jesus, why they don't really know God. You know, fill in the blank. It's just an endless attack, basically, on every other group. And then when one of those groups hears that and decides to respond and looks honestly and examines this group and shows and points out things that are wrong with them. I'm just saying to those of you who are coming to any of us with that question of why we're picking on this group, I think a simpler response would be to just say, well, they started it, really. I mean, they're kind of just asking for people to defend themselves, and in a lot of ways, you know, they're kind of picking at everybody else in their doctrine. The core of their doctrine just picks at every other group that would call themselves Christian, and so it seems reasonable, completely reasonable, that people like me would respond to that and say, hey, I don't think I'm a Satan worshiper because, you know, I put a Christmas tree in my house or things like this, and I have valid reasons for believing that I think can be substantiated with the Bible. Most of them won't have a conversation with me to hear me out on why, but I just think that's something that a lot of these people are asking, so I thought it's kind of worth throwing that in there.
And it's pretty funny that Jordan, you weren't even a member of the church, but you pretty much nailed it on the head as to like what they teach. I mean, and what they do is they do tear apart other churches and what they believe. I mean, they literally teach through Daniel's prophecy and Revelation that every single person is under the control of Satan, under the control of the one who bears the number 666.
Yeah.
And yet they say they're full of love. But then in the same breath, they'll say, okay, but if you don't follow Ansang Hong or John Gil-ja, you are on the side of Satan.
You have the mark of the beast.
Yeah, you have the mark of the beast. And
Right.
but yet when we put out critical information about the church with facts, mind you, with evidence, they say, why are you picking on us? But like as you mentioned, like they actively teach. They have studies. Jordan, you know how to preach those. I know you know how to preach those studies. I know how to preach those studies about how the Roman Catholic Church and all the other churches in the world, and even people who don't even go to church, and even people who aren't even in Christianity, are all under Satan.
Yep.
So.
Well, I would like to make a comment about that. World Mission is not special, okay? Every cult does that.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of what makes them a cult is that they are the only way and the gatekeepers of everything and heaven, and they're the only path to get there. World Mission thinks that they're special. They're not. They're not the only ones that believe that they have the ultimate truth. Other cults believe the same thing. And another like characteristic of a cult is that they don't tolerate any dissent or criticism. And World Mission has shown us time and time and again that they don't tolerate any criticism, whether it's fighting with us on YouTube. And I'm not talking about debate because I welcome that. That we want that. That's great. We want to present the other side of the story. What members or people do ultimately, whether they choose to join the group or leave the group, that's a decision that's theirs. Why would we encourage like dependence on anyone else? That's what the cult does.
But they have the right to an informed decision, and that's the information we're providing them. Is we're providing them that information to make that decision on their own, which is what the church tries to take away from them.
Right. More importantly, the information that they'll never hear inside the vacuum of the cult, because they want to control whatever information the members getting, whether it be the interpretation about the Bible, like how they say, you can't read the Bible on your own and understand it. You have to come here and study with us in order to understand it. Otherwise, you're lost. You don't know, I used to ask them, what if I was stranded on an island with a Bible? Does that mean I'm going to hell because I don't have one of you there to interpret it for me? And they couldn't really answer that. And I said, don't you think that God would care, that I was there on my own trying to learn about God and trying to, find my way? Wouldn't that be enough? It's not enough because, a World Mission leader isn't stranded on that island with me to save me and interpret the Bible for me. I said, I don't believe that to be true. And Jordan, you can chime in on that one. I mean, that's just my perspective on that. That was the big issue for me.
Yeah, there's a verse in 1 John where he says, you don't have any need that any man teach you because his anointing, he's talking about the Holy Spirit, teaches you all things. So there's actually a specific verse that addresses that. yeah, so I think you're right. And
Awesome.
it is it's a characteristic of a cult, obviously, to do that and to operate that way. And it just displays a fear of losing control of their members. If you can, they need to have that doctrine that you can only know the Bible through their leadership, because if they don't teach that, then they're going to lose control of the members. If the members think for themselves and they don't just stay on the dotted lines of the verses they pinpoint here and there, and they actually start reading the scriptures for themselves, they're going to realize it doesn't teach what they say. You can't find their message. You can't find their doctrines in the scripture. And so they need to maintain that control by creating that false concept that only their leadership can teach them the Bible. And the funny thing, the ironic thing about that is how similar that is to the Catholic Church and a lot of what produced the Reformation, where it was only, the high up, the religious leaders who had access to the Bible, and a big part of the Reformation was getting access to the common man, and the belief that everybody should be able to read the scriptures, and God can speak to everybody, and it doesn't have to come through, the priest or the WMSCOG leadership. Really, this just gets back to God's desire, the heart of God, I think, and just God's love for every person. And there's no hierarchy with God.
Right. I see what you mean. And going back to, you mentioned the Catholic Church, like what Kelsey was saying, they have this whole study and just bashing, defaming.
Well, first of all, that study's
Catholic
not
Church.
theirs either, by the way.
Oh, yeah, it's the Seventh-day Adventist,
with
yeah.
them either.
But they love using it, and I don't even see the Catholic Church going after them for defamation, and they
when was the
love
last time the Catholic Church sued someone for defamation? Like, they are not concerned. They don't have like an entire team of people dedicated to monitoring people on the internet like us, I think it's just ridiculous. It really shows what they're really about.
And I think it shows their awareness of the fragility, is that a word? The fragileness, how fragile their beliefs are.
Sounds like a word.
They're obviously aware of how easy it is to crack this thing, and that's why they have to closely monitor and make sure nobody touches their foundations and starts messing with it, because if that goes on too long, it's all going to crumble. And so they got to keep a close watch on it. Which, I don't know. I've said it before. I don't think the members involved in this are evil or purposely deceiving people. But man, I would have some words to say to this John Giljaw, or these leaders who I believe are fully, absolutely aware of what they're doing, and they're deceiving people. And even just the stories I hear about members who have had conversations with Zongil-Ja on the phone, things like this, and just the evil of her deception and just the way she acts and the things she says to try to manipulate. It's just, if I think about it too long, blood pressure starts going up.
Have you seen the video, Jordan, of the phone call between Zongil-Ja and Diane?
No, I haven't watched that yet. I actually forgot about it until you just reminded me. So I need to watch that.
Gotta check that out.
Yeah, we should talk about that for a second. Now that you brought that up, I think that's another thing that World Mission really wants to control, whatever information about the leadership very tightly, what gets out, So any kind of a phone call or a video of Zongil-Ja that they haven't put together themselves and edited and perfectly packaged for the public gets out, that makes them very nervous. Because personally, when I watch those things or listen to those things, they immediately humanize her. The fact that she doesn't know who she's talking to, and she's like, oh, is that Deacon Jeff? And it's someone named Tom on the phone trying to talk to her. And when Tom is asking for help with his wife, she doesn't know who the wife is, and she just keeps saying like, I love you, I miss you, and all this other emotional blackmail stuff. It just really shows how manipulative the whole organization is, how manipulative she is, or seems to be on the phone call. And she's just a woman. You know what I mean? Like, I remember when I saw the video, the 1999 video, when they show the reporter going to her apartment.
Yeah.
And I'm like, she's just some lady that lived in downtown Seoul in South Korea. Like, everybody, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing special about her. She reminds me of the Wizard of Oz, you know? How like they're on the Yellow Brick Road and they think that this wizard is all powerful and all that stuff.
Right.
And when they look behind the curtain, it's just this, you know,
Regular dude.
Fragile old man. Right. So those are things that kind of go through my head when I see those things. And I think that they really don't want their members to see that side of her or that side of the organization.
Human side.
That's right, because she's human.
Yeah.
Right. They only humanize her when it's convenient. When we ask why she was married, divorced, or had children,
Yeah.
it was like, well, she had to be like us, you know, human like us. But I'm like, but she's only human like us when it's convenient for you, you know? like if she falls asleep in the service, it's because, you know, she's like burning for your sins or whatever. Like I can't.
Like, no, she needs a nap.
Right.
Nap time.
Right. Like even when I saw a video that was released, I don't even know if it's still up or whatever, where she was giving a sermon, just hearing her talk about An Sang-hong and all these stories about him, how poor he was and how much he traveled through the mountains or whatever to preach to people, and how he'd give people money all the time, which I don't understand, because if he was so poor, then where did he get the money from? Like, I just stories just don't make sense, and to me they seem to be designed to provoke an emotional response in the member, where they feel guilty, where they feel sad, they feel like, oh my God, how am I gonna, you know, repay God for the sacrifice, you know, which is a whole different topic that I think Jordan Hatfield probably has tackled in some of his videos. But it's just it's sad, and it's also infuriating to see those things and know that that's the purpose behind it. You know, I remember seeing the members cry whenever those videos were played in the church. I mean, like cry, like sobbing. They would hand out tissues even before they started playing the video.
Yep.
They're like, oh, you're gonna cry. Do you want a tissue? And like when someone tells me I'm gonna cry, I'm not gonna cry just because you said I'm gonna cry. So I mean, it's just those things that happen through your membership that you sort of are like red flags that you file away for later. I'm sure you guys have your own. That was one of them for me, just that they kind of try to prime my reaction to the video before I even got to see it. And it was like, I don't know if you guys saw the video. It was like it was a version of the prodigal son, but instead of the father, it was the mother god. And the son left and came back. Do you guys know which video I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about.
I remember that.
Really old. They stopped showing that.
Well,
they stopped showing that one a while back.
Yeah, I'm talking like 2009, 2010.
Yeah, I remember that video.
And I remember thinking to myself, this isn't how the story goes. Like, what is this? You know, because it was super dramatic, and it reminded me of like a really bad Spanish soap opera. It was just a lot of
really cringy
crying, and it was just made me really uncomfortable. I don't know if other people felt differently, but I
actually forgot about that video. Wow, you just unlocked a whole side of memories that I'm probably gonna bring up in the future.
Sorry.
No, you're good. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Wow.
I don't know how many times. I don't know how many times I've seen videos like that where it's, again, it's just like you said, to produce like an emotional response in people watching and the members watching it, making them think like they need to work harder, that they need to bring more people into the church, because the church teaches us the only way you can repay God for their sacrifice. That's the only way you can repay An Sang-hong and John Gil-ja is by bringing more members into the church and having those members stay, and, you know, that they themselves tithing and, you know, bringing more people in as well. And I remember like they would show, like especially after the afternoon service on Sabbath days, they would show like church videos, like especially like emotional ones. They would make everybody come upstairs to the sanctuary to watch them, and then afterwards everybody would have to give their fragrance, which, you know, as we know, means like testimony, right? Like saying how the video had like an effect on them, and people would just go up and people would start crying, and because they would feel so guilty that you know, that both, you know, they were so poor, that they worked so hard by themselves for so long. Or when I say they, I'm talking about, of course, you know, An Sang-hong and Jang Gil-ja. And I hated that, because I knew they were doing that for that purpose. And so like I would do whatever I could during that time to try to find some other activity to do, because they would make everybody go upstairs, even the children. And so I would like volunteer to cook or something, because it drove me crazy seeing the church do that. And they would want, and when people wouldn't come up, they would want leaders to go up to kind of motivate others to come up and share a story too. And it was just, I absolutely hated it. I absolutely hated it. And when like it came down to the you know, An Sang-hong, he didn't live as poor of a life as the church says he did. They say, oh, he only had like 1 or 2 suits, but there's pictures of him in multiple colored suits. They said he was so poor that he had to drink stream water, yet you see him with like a feast in front of him. And of course members say, or the church says like, oh, members provided him that food. But if the members cared about him so much that they would provide him like a feast of food, why weren't those members preaching with him? Because the church also said he was preaching alone in the mountains by himself. And it's just a whole bunch of contradictions, again with the purpose to make us feel guilty, so that we'll recruit more people who come in and who tithe and who bring more people.
Didn't he have children to support? Like,
yeah, he had children, but
Yeah.
because Jordan, have you
4
been to
of
Korea?
them.
no,
Jordan,
I've never been to Korea.
oh, you never? Okay, so
I
when you
never
go to
went.
Korea, one of the places they take you is called Elohim Academy, and it's like this really secluded place in the mountains of who knows where in Korea.
Right.
And they like it. They have like a little like makeshift hut that they made as a replica of the supposedly the hut that An Sang-hong lived in. And it's so small, and he had 3 kids and a wife,
Yeah.
right? So
He had
it's so
4
small.
kids.
Oh, 4 kids, 4 kids. He had 4 kids and a wife, right? So there's no way that it was just like this. I don't know dimensions, I'm not good at math, but it was like so small. There's no way that even 2 people could have lived in this hut, let alone
50
6
square
people.
feet.
Yeah, with
Like,
no electricity, no running water. It's like that. It didn't happen. And even people who were with An Sang-hong, because Jang Gil-ja, she didn't get baptized until like 1969. So An Sang-hong, he started his church in 1964. That's 5 years after he started his church. That's when Jang Gil-ja came on board. So there were people who were with An Sang-hong within those 5 years who say that, you know, he was not as poor as people said he was, and he didn't spend 37 years breaking stones. Yeah, he worked manual jobs, but he wasn't, you know, breaking stones like the church. And also when you go to Korea, another place they take you is the Church of God Museum, which is like in their head office building. It's like a whole floor on their head office building where they have like the whole history of the church from the early church days until now. And one of the stations that they take you to is like this little cove where they have like 2 boulders on a stick, and you and somebody else can try to put the boulders on your back, and it's like insanely heavy. So they want you to do that so you can see I can see Michelle's face, so you can understand like how much weight he had to carry every single day for 37 years as a quarry person. So it's just like it's a whole lot of emotional just, you know, control over its members. So.
Did you remember that
What a
video?
tortured soul.
An Sang-hong's stunt double, his look-alike. Remember?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I know who that was.
Those videos where they would show like, you know, they would actually depict the scenes like where he's breaking stones and carrying them, and they have his like shoulder all bleeding and like
Yeah.
like all super dramatic.
Yeah.
And why was he doing this exactly?
Oh, because apparently that was the only job you could get without having to work on Saturday, so he could keep the Sabbath day.
Okay.
Well, let me tell you, he found other jobs because he didn't do that for 37 years. So, yeah.
Very super blown out of proportions.
It is. It's
Right.
just to make people feel
Oh my
guilty
God.
for it. And it never happened. Because, I have a challenge for the church. If they want to challenge me on that, tell me what company he worked for 37 years. He worked there 37 years. There should be some kind of documentation. He died in 1985. So, like, that wasn't too long ago. It's like 30-something years. So there should be some kind of documentation by then.
Yeah, you're right.
What do you think, Jordan? Yeah, I see you smiling through this.
Oh man, I want to be careful not to open my mouth right now.
Oh, that's
I
insane.
mean, there's definitely a difference between the information inside the vacuum and the information outside of the vacuum. Like, as a member, you hear different things in services that you wouldn't hear outside of the church because they don't publish them online.
Right.
And we recently published a sermon by Zangilja where she's talking about the end times, and she says, like, how joyful it will be when other people are dying and we're not. Like, what God says that, like, so that was so bizarre to me.
Right.
To read that.
Right, and I remember being told in the church that, like, and not only me, it was others who were told too. Like, they were told that if their spouse died if we're living in the last days and their spouse dies in front of them, they need to have strong enough faith in Ansahong and Janggilja not to like leave, but to remain strong in their faith in Ansahong and Janggilja. And it was not only the example of like your spouse, it could be like your kids. If your kid, like, you need to have faith strong enough that if your kid dies in front of you in the last days, that you still believe in Ansahong and Janggilja.
Yeah, one of the members told me that we were going to get a phone call one day from Zangilja telling us all to flee to Zion.
Yeah.
And when that phone call came, we all had to drop whatever we were doing and just go there. We couldn't stop anywhere on the way there. She couldn't stop to pick up her child, who was a toddler at the time. And I said, well, what about your child? And she's like, well, I just have to trust in father and mother that they will take care of the baby, and he'll get there, or he'll be saved, or whatever. And I just thought that was so weird.
Is the baby gonna crawl there? Like, no.
I don't know.
Impractical.
Yeah, just that sense of detachment that they create between family members, spouses, mother and child, because they redefine the whole family unit. We talked about that in another video. The way that they're able to do that. I mean, husbands call their wives sister in front of other church members. They don't say my wife.
Mm-hmm.
They say sister said blah blah blah. And I remember when my husband at the time would do that, it would make me feel really uncomfortable. Just like, what?
And another weird thing is that they didn't, like, they would call each other brother and sister, but like if somebody asked, like, hey, who are you married to, because they would see like a wedding ring, they say, oh, who are you married to, and people were so secretive over that. It was weird.
They're secretive about a lot of things: the age, who they're married to, anything really. Their real name. I remember asking someone. It was a deacon. I remember asking like how old he was, and he just didn't want to tell me. And it was like that multiple times. I just wanted to test it out. So I asked another Korean. I asked him how old he was, and he just didn't want to tell me. Like, they don't want
to say their
anything.
name. They don't want to say their real name. They don't want to say their age. They don't want to say who they're married to. If that doesn't sound suspicious, I don't know what does.
All right, guys.
Some theories on why that is, but we'll save that for another.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been a very I think a very successful and really impactful video that you viewers are gonna be watching. So any closing thoughts about this whole subpoena thing, or anything you would like the viewers to know? Jordan, Kelsey, Michelle.
Well, I think Peter kind of summed it up, but for me, this is just what cults do. They've been doing this for years now. I don't think they're going to stop anytime soon. I think what needs to change is people's reaction to their actions, if that makes sense. They have been successful in intimidating people before, and the hope would be that people watching this would understand that what they're doing, you know, probably isn't going to fly with the courts, and it's just a method of intimidation and harassment. And hopefully that won't stop people from leaving or speaking out and doing the right thing, or what I would think was the right thing, or what they think is the right thing, is to help other people perhaps, you know, leave because they realize that, you know, what they've been doing or seeing or witnessing was wrong. And that they won't be scared to talk about it, you know, like we are. I feel like some people, they're still afraid of being sued, even though, you know, the non-disclosure agreement in New Jersey was, you know, declared null and void by the court. I think that they're still afraid because the cult has put this fear into them. And, you know, you hear them talking about the slanderers and the people who leave, or then the Satan and the Judases and whatever other names they want to assign to us. My hope is that if they see that this is not going to work, that we're not intimidated, that they can serve 20 more subpoenas. It's not going to matter. We're still going to keep talking. And we hope that others join us. But that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I just would just say simply again, I mean, that's my main thing about this is you can go back and find in videos where we've talked about part way just hoping that they would take some form of legal action. And I just do think it is such reconfirmation of everything that that we're saying. And so just kind of a loving challenge, I guess, just to even to the leadership who might come across this and watch this, just to say, like, why is it that you would respond this way to people just sharing different views, sharing things about your group that I think are truthful, and they're not just being made up. And then, you know, even from my perspective, just a person who's speaking out with theological disagreements about their doctrine, I would just say you guys, you're not you guys, but the leadership, you are doing that in all of your preaching. You're telling your members to go out and basically wipe the slate clean as far as other churches and get all them off the radar by convincing people that every other group is of Satan and has lost the truth, and only you have the true truth of the Bible. And so why would you be upset with groups like people like me who are sharing an opposing view of that from the Bible? And I think the biggest part of that is just why are you not obeying Jesus when he says, bless those who persecute you, bless and don't curse? I can't think of a better example of the wrong way to respond to that command of Jesus than to do what they're doing in this situation.
Yeah.
And then I would like to add, Leah Remini, she puts in her Scientology show, her anti-Scientology show, that, the truth should be able to stand up against criticism and questioning. And
Right.
The fact that the WMSCOG is not willing to stand up to criticism or questioning and instead tries to quash it, that shows that they're not the truth. That should,
Yep.
that should show that to members that they're not the truth.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And one of my favorite, in regards to the subpoenas, one of my favorite movies that kind of always stuck with me is North Country. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's a Charlize Theron film, and in it, she's fighting for women's rights, and in it she says, she in the courtroom she says, whether you win or lose, you stand up. And that's how, like, I view this. I'm not going to be intimidated by any effort to try to scare me or silence me. And I'm gonna, at the end of the day, I'm gonna stand up because it's the right thing to do. A lot of people, they don't know what they're getting into when they're in the church, and they have a right to know this information that the church does not want them to know.
They need to know both sides of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because but prior to maybe Michelle even putting out that examining site, even maybe after that too, a lot of people were not familiar with that site. They only just got one side of the story. So that's, again, my thing. Like, I just want them to have two sides of the story, to think about it, and to really have some concrete information from someone that was in for a while, you know, that has experienced, you know, different eras of the church, you know, from the early days to up to the time I left. It was like almost two different, you know, churches
Because
in
they
terms of,
change things.
yeah, they change things over and over and over. So I want
People who
people to
have
know that. Yeah.
Yeah, people who have come in 2014 and newer, you know, or 2000, even 2013 and newer, didn't, you know, might not have experienced the church in the same way that us who were in the church before 2013, because they've changed a lot of their teachings. Because when the examining site came out, and not only examining site, but even when people went online and we're talking about, like, you know, the church, you know, accusing the church of breaking up families, of, you know, of racism and all these things, they made efforts to quash that by trying to improve their image. So the church that all three of us grew up in, and, you know, in the WMS, is not the church. I mean, sorry, I wouldn't say it's not the church that doesn't exist today, but they need to the people who are in the church today, they need to understand that, you know, if you say like, well, I was never taught that, I was never taught that the church, you know, taught that, taught about racism, or, like, you know, taught about like racism through the story of Noah's sons, right? But just because you weren't taught that doesn't mean the church didn't teach that. So even though the church might be different in some of those aspects, largely, you know, it's still the same cult tactics that have been going on from the beginning.
Yeah, and
I totally
I
agree.
also want to say one thing about that, and maybe Jordan can chime in on this, but they claim to have the only truth, but
Mhm.
that only truth is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from a biblical perspective, I don't know that that's supported. Just the inconsistency and the like historical revisionism that goes on, that doesn't seem biblical either. But, you know, Jordan Hatfield will be the expert in this group about that. But when you think about, you know, the true church and God and the Bible, you know, I don't associate those two things.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know, they can't.
it's obviously problematic how much that, like, Kelsey, what you're kind of saying. I mean, it's just evolving. The church is just constantly, it's kind of morphing and forming in some ways. You know, I think a lot of the core things about it are staying the same, but it seems like in large part it's evolving based on the outside influence of people speaking against it, or like the problems that are being pointed out, and so it's then shifting according to those things. And, you know, even things like that, something we kind of hammered on several times was just the issue with how the handicapped and homeless are treated, or just ignored and taught to be ignored. Things like that, it just makes me wonder, as these things are pointed out, how many of those things are going to shift, and they're going to change those teachings, not because they believe they're wrong or believe that they actually care, but because they're worried about
Right.
how that's, you know, going to be perceived. And so, yeah, it's all just kind of a mess and very problematic, obviously.
Yeah. With
Yeah.
that,
You know, sorry.
no, go ahead, Michelle. You want to say something before I close
Just
it out?
one more thing.
Go ahead.
The
Go ahead.
videos that I saw of Zengil Jha talking about An Sung Hong and how poor he was and how he preached to the poor, the church doesn't do that anymore. So if they believe that An Sung Hong was Jesus and that he was God, then why aren't they following his example? He preached to the poor, according to them. But the church doesn't do that now. They say that poor people or homeless people will only take advantage of the church, and they're not going to be there really because they believe in God and just to, you know, benefit from, you know, food or whatever it is that they want to claim. Yet their founding, their leader, the person they believe to be God, did the opposite. And how do you reconcile that? You can't. Just contradictions like that unless you hear the other side of the story, you perhaps won't see it. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, with that, with you viewers watching this, I really want to get your thoughts in the comment section below, especially if you're a current member. What do you think about your church trying to subpoena the recordings that, you know, from Zoom and YouTube? Just want to get some honest thoughts, what you guys think. And for you former members or people who have maybe mutuals that are a part of this church, and maybe get your thoughts as well. This is a really interesting time that we're in. and it's for me personally, it's pretty fun. It's a pretty fun time to be going through this. I mean, it's very interesting. I didn't think I would be in this position, but it's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting that we are. But yeah, with that, guys, I appreciate you all for joining. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Peace. Hello again. I appreciate you guys sticking it out through the whole video, through the whole Zoom meeting between myself and others. I'm actually recording this as I am editing the video. I had just received a call from Michelle, who was in the video that you just watched. And I just received notification that Google actually responded, in response to the subpoena to turn over the recordings from YouTube. And I will post a link down in the description below. It's going to be posted on the Examining the WMSCOG website. Feel free to take a look at it. Just to sum it up in a few sentences, from what I gather from reading this information, the WMSCOG in their subpoena, they provided insufficient information. They requested, recordings from Jordan Young, Jordan Hatfield, Kelsey Wells, and others, not knowing that they actually needed to provide more information in order to even get Google and YouTube to even consider turning over those recordings. And then if you can, just reading the link, clicking on it, you'll find some more information about the First Amendment rights, and even jurisdictions come into play here, because Google's located in California and the case is going on in New Jersey. So it's just it's a lot of holes and a lot of leaps that have to be taken, even even for Google to consider turning over these recordings. So I hope you guys take this information, even for you current members, you former members that are watching this video. Let me know what you guys think, because I think it's pretty awesome that as I'm in the midst of editing the video that you've just seen, I just got this notification. It was perfect timing. Anyways, I'll see you guys on the next video. Hope you guys are all staying safe in this hectic year 2020. Peace.